Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Auto Insurance Company Played the Odds and Lost. I was recently reminded of this story, and while it is on the weak side of pro-revenge, I think it's good enough to share, and plus, this sub needs more content. It was winter 2010, and I was driving my beat-up 1990 Toyota Celica on a snowy, two-lane road in a storm. As I was making a left turn, the guy behind me tried to pass, and ended up hitting my driver's side door and quarter panel. He was super apologetic, said he worked at a nearby bar and was just getting off work. He smelled like liquor, and his eyes looked glazed, but I was not quite sure if he was drunk, or just smelled like the bar. He asked if we could not involve insurance and offered to pay me cash. I said that would be alright, took down his info, and we parted ways. I take the car to the shop, and asked how much it would be just to fix the door. And they quoted me something like $1,100. So I called the guy up and told him the amount, and he says, "Oh, that's way too high. I was thinking I would give you $100 and you could bang out the dent with a hammer." I told him that was not acceptable at all, and he starts getting upset and yelling at me. I tell him I am done with him, and he can just give me his insurance information now, and I will make a claim. He stops yelling, and gives me this, "Oh, okay, if that's what you want." I get the info, hang up and first call my insurance. I only had liability on the vehicle, so they said they are not a part of this, and I need to call his insurance. So, I call his insurance and make the claim. When his insurance realized I only had liability on the car, and they would not be fighting my insurance on who was at fault, they flat out denied my claim. They never sent an investigator to look at my car, they just denied me by claiming I was at fault. This seemed crazy to me that they could just deny my claim even though I was obviously not at fault. I contested the decision and took the claim to the people who oversee insurance companies, don't remember what they called, and then some weeks later, they denied my claim also, saying they found me to be at fault. I was pretty upset but didn't know what else to do. I had never been in this position before. I talked to my dad about it, and he tells me I need to take him to small claims court and name the insurance company also. He tells me that the insurance company is playing the odds and figures I won't know what to do, and like most people, will just do nothing. I go into the courthouse and file the suit for the very high Blue Book value of my car at $3,500, since the damage on the car, at the car's value, totaled it, and name both the driver and his insurance company in the suit. The insurance company sends a lawyer from a city 4 hours away, and he has to make 3 trips to the court for this case. He calls me and asks to meet me at the courthouse a few days before the trial. I'm laughing thinking about how much the insurance company must have spent on this lawyer to drive and come here 3 separate days. Definitely worth more than the value of my car. At the courthouse, he offers to pay me $1,500 right now to close this case. I tell him, "No way, the company you represent made me take it this far, so I will see you at court." The lawyer gave me smile and nod, and I left. The day of court, I show up with pictures of the damage to my car, pictures of comparable cars with the Blue Book for it, and sit quietly. I only talk when the judge asks me to, and tell him the story from when he tried to pass me on the left and hit me, said he would pay for it, all the way to his response of $100 and I could bang it out with a hammer, and his insurance company denying me. When it was the other driver's turn to talk, he was nervous and tripping over words, sometimes talking when the judge was. The judge asked him if he realized that agreeing to pay for damages to a car is an admission of guilt. He said he did not. And it went on for a little bit while he told his side of the story. Unlike TV, usually judges don't make a decision on the case right there. They like to take it back and go over things further, and I imagine it also keeps it from getting crazy in court when someone doesn't like the verdict. A few days later I get a letter in the mail saying I won the case for the amount of $2,500, which was more than fair for my car. And soon after I get a call from the lawyer saying he would like to meet so he can give me the check. I met him at the courthouse again, where he smiled, handed me the check, and said, "Congratulations on the case." I'm not exactly sure, but I'd like to think that he respected the way I handled it. I know he was just doing his job, but he knew what was going on, and the look he gave me when I told him I wouldn't accept the $1,500 check and was taking it to court, and when he handed me the $2,500 check, seemed like genuine respect and happiness for me. For even me writing this, it feels pretty weak for pro-revenge. The money insurance spent on the $2,500 settlement check and the lawyer are but a drop in the bucket for what they are worth. But I taught him that the odds don't always work in their favor, and because the guy lost the case, insurance put the at-fault accident on his record. Had he asked, I would have worked with him on the price, but $100 and you can hammer out the dent was insulting. The car was well used, but the body was straight before the accident. I would have probably accepted pulling out the dents and bondo, but he didn't even try to work with me. Also, I hope this story helps someone else was denied an insurance claim and didn't know what to do. If not for my dad, I would have let this whole thing go. Next one is titled, "Racist Douche Landlord Gets a Surprise." In the early to mid-2000s I went to college in a small, rural Ohio town. I wanted to get out of the dorms, so I went searching for a place to rent and came upon a small, one-story prefab house, think double-wide trailer on a concrete slab. It was clean, but it was old and hadn't aged well. The landlord wasn't mean, but he was cheap. Fixes to the house took forever and he only used old crap he found in his barn. For example, the sprayer for the kitchen sink broke. It took him 2 weeks of searching to find a used one covered in dirt and spider webs to install. Another time I lost my house key. The lock was so old the local hardware store couldn't make a new key and a locksmith suggested we simply replace the lock. It took the landlord the better part of a month to replace the lock with, yet again, another used part from his barn, during which time I had to petition my roommates to let me in. It was a pain, but again, the guy wasn't malicious, so I dealt with it. The house had serious plumbing issues. All of the drain pipes were cast iron and went through the slab, meaning they were jammed with rust and inaccessible. At first, this was only a minor convenience. The shower and kitchen sink drained slow. When this happened, the landlord would show up with a snake and try to clear the rust with limited results. Several months into the lease, it got so bad that the shower wouldn't drain at all and raw sewage backed up in the laundry room sink. We desperately called the landlord. It took 2 days to get a hold of him, at which time he said, "Ugh, can't you for a few weeks when my plumber friend can look at it?" "No, we can't." He finally caved and called an actual plumber. The final bill was over $1,000. This landlord owned several houses close together. One of them went up for rent and a buddy of mine, who happened to be Latino, wanted to rent it. The landlord took one look at him and said it had already been rented, which it hadn't. It sat on the market for another few months before he rented it to a white couple. Around this time, I was getting my hair cut and making small talk with the stylist. We were chatting and I casually mentioned where I lived and she said, "Wait, is racist douche landlord your landlord? That guy is a Klansman. He tried to get my sister, the local seamstress, to sew a patch on this white sheet and she refused." Now it made sense. I was upset. The petty revenge. On the last day of my move out at the end of my lease, I had to clean the fridge out. I opened the hatch to the attic and disposed of all of the food in the fridge, making sure to open the Tupperware containers full of leftovers, gallon of milk, vegetables, and half-eaten rotisserie chicken. I threw it as far as I could into the back of the attic, and then I closed the hatch and finished moving out. He ended up keeping my deposit for other BS reasons, but I wasn't upset. I never found out what came of the rotting food in the attic, but I'm sure he had fun playing "What's That Smell?" Edit, as far as the racism thing, we had no definitive proof, that's why my friend got turned down. I'm sure we could have done something, but honestly we were just dumb college students. As far as me inadvertently ducking over the next tenant, just stop. I was friends with the neighbor and it was vacant for over a month after I moved out. Would you rent a place that smelled terrible? No single mothers were harmed in this petty revenge. Next one is titled, "Won't honor the posted prices, eh?" Back when I was a poor college student, I had a free afternoon to wander around a new city for a few hours. I happened across a model train shop and was really excited because someday I hope to have the resources to start building a model train layout. So I wandered for a while and found a cabinet of train cars, each in their own box, and each with 2 price tags. One price tag was white like all the others in the store and out of my price range, and the other tags were yellow or orange, and way less expensive. I spent the next 45 minutes or so going through that cabinet and picking out a very cool selection of cars that fit nicely into my budget, and took them up to check out. The guy starts ringing them up, and he is ringing up just the higher prices. So I say, "Oh hey, I got the ones that are on sale, you're ringing up the wrong tags." He just keeps ringing them up and tells me only the white tags are correct, the other tags are their original price when first issued, and they are only there because some collectors like having them. So I asked where it explained that, and he starts getting rude. I should have known, why am I wasting his time, anyone could guess that. I said it's not cool to not honor a written price, and he got even more rude, so I left. Now I worked in retail eons ago, so I know you get in trouble for not honoring a marked price. If the guy was cool about it, and just explained nicely, I'd just have left, disappointed but informed. But he was a dismissive jerk, and needed to be taught a lesson. So I called the State Department of Weights and Measures. I figured I'd leave a message and he would get a phone call, and that was it. I ended up talking to an investigator who had me walk through the entire experience while he asked lots of questions. After I hung up, I went on with my day and didn't give it a second thought. 2 weeks later I got a phone call. The investigator was calling back to give me some follow-up information. He had gone to the shop and recreated my experience exactly, and his experience progressed exactly the same as mine, except that the guy was apparently even more rude and condescending. Then he took out the badge. He explained exactly what I had tried to tell him, that he had to honor the prices unless he had signs up explaining why there were 2 prices. The guy kept being rude until the inspector said that this was serious enough that he could be looking at a substantial fine and maybe even jail time. If, however, he did what I had asked for in the first place, he wouldn't get written up. He then changed his tune. I went by a couple years later and every case had a very nicely worded sign explaining the pricing situation, just like I had tried to suggest. I asked what the story was with the sign, and he said he had to make sure that he was clear so no one could misunderstand, because he didn't want to get in trouble. Next one is titled, "A Hole Ruins Their Car." I used to live in a modular housing community, aka trailer park, that was basically a quiet retirement community with little traffic, crime, or animosity between neighbors. Good ownership and management kept it that way, and everyone was happy living there. The police would occasionally cruise through, but only because they enjoyed spending some quiet time in an area of town that wasn't riddled with crime. It was a break for them, and we enjoyed having them there mostly to talk baseball and exchange jokes with. Within a couple of years though, the community was sold to a new owner and management company, and they basically let anyone who could pay the lot rent in without any vetting to keep the unruly out. The place went to hell within 3 months, with loud parties at night and plenty of crime, with the police there literally every night shutting down parties, arresting drug dealers, investigating break-ins and such. I lived at a space that was located at the top of where 2 roads connected to form a dead-ended intersection, and one of our new tenants liked to drive their ridiculously lowered vehicle with an exhaust system that amplified the engine noise to its loudest through the park late at night and do a nightly U-turn over my lawn and driveway so they could head back down the road they just came up. I'm guessing primarily to double the noise in the neighborhood while avoiding having to turn too sharply with their modified suspension by driving over my lawn. This repeatedly happened, and sometimes the tire tracks were as much as 3 to 4 feet over the road into my lawn and across my driveway. The lawn actually belonged to the park, but it was my contractual responsibility to keep the lawn and the rest of the property looking nice. So naturally I was PO'd at having to repeatedly fix my lawn because the jerk down the street enjoyed driving on it and tearing it up. I went to the park's new management, complained about the damage that new neighbors were doing to my lawn, and got the typical trifecta response. First, we don't care because it's really park property and you still have to maintain it. Second, we don't care because we want the increased lot revenue from the new tenants more. And third, stop being a Karen and suck it up and shut up because we don't care, since you're on an old contract at a low fixed rental rate that we can't legally jack up through the roof. Now the pro-revenge part. I reread my contract closely to make sure I was within my tenant rights relating to temporary landscape improvements, and went to the river to find 2 large smooth river rocks that had just the right shape and weight as temporary landscape improvements, 4 to 6 inches high, and weighed at least 25 pounds each. After a couple of hours, I found just the right ones, hauled them home, and painted them green to match the lawn, painted some decorative flowers on the sides, and plopped one down in each corner of my lawn and driveway. We shall say purely for aesthetic enhancement, e.g. About 2 in the morning that night I could hear the jerk with the super loud exhaust pipe on his car with the ridiculously lowered suspension coming down road to perform his usual U-turn over my lawn. I sat in my darkened house watching with glee as he ran up over the rocks, got high-centered, and had to jack up the car to get the rocks out from underneath. They also knocked his suspension loose with one front tire aiming off in a slightly different direction than the other, and completely detached the super loud exhaust pipe that the jerk had to chuck into the back seat of his car. The best part was watching him slowly limp his now very quiet but squirrely steering car back down the road the direction it came. The next day in the afternoon, surprisingly, the park manager knocked on my door and said they had received a complaint that I had damaged another tenant's vehicle by placing rocks in the road, and wanted an explanation. I grabbed my park contract and showed them my new decorative landscape enhancements, placed fully within the boundaries of my lawn. I made it a sickeningly repetitive point to make sure the park manager saw both the tire tracks and the resulting damage to my lawn, the scratches the undercarriage did to my new decorative rocks, and the section in my contract regarding temporary landscape improvements, and I explained the rocks were there to stay until I got eviction papers. I never heard super loud pipes or from the manager again, and my lawn remained perfect after that. Next one is titled, Groundhog for the Evil Hag. So this is pretty messed up, but here it goes. I once lived in an apartment with my best friend. It was not a nice place, but the price was right. Our neighbor on one side was a middle-aged lady with 2 sons. Let's say 13 and 16 years old. These boys were all godded out and kind of weird, but they seemed to be good kids. They were always outside sitting on our shared steps. After we had been there for a while, we figured out why. Their mother was absolutely terrible to these boys. Through our thin walls, we could hear the daily verbal abuse, constant yelling and name-calling. As a result, we hated this lady. She was a terrible person. We would occasionally let the boys come in and play video games or hang out for a few minutes if it was raining or cold, so they didn't have to go home. One night, my friend and I get wasted and somehow find a freshly dead groundhog. This evil lady's car happened to be unlocked, so we gutted this dead groundhog and shoved it under her driver's seat. It was like the middle of summer. You can imagine the stench that must have come from that car. The car did not move for 3 or 4 days. Then one day it was gone and we never saw it again. We didn't put much thought into our stupid plan, and, unfortunately, a few days later we heard the lady blaming one of the kids for the car. She didn't say a lot about it, and, of course, the kids didn't know a thing about it. This was years ago and I'm not proud of what we did, but that's not to say that evil hag didn't deserve it. Last one is titled, I Gave My Cat the Ultimate Hiss. So, let me preface this by saying that my cat is fine, was not harmed, and is sitting, purring next to me as I speak. On to the story. My cat is a bit naughty. To be fair, it goes both ways. She'll scratch my chair to get my attention, then run away, meow loudly when I'm concentrating on something to startle me, jump on me when I'm sleeping, and such things. In return, I tickle her nose with a bird feather when she sleeps, pretend I'm going to pick her up, which she hates, and twig her tail when she's not seen me yet, giving her a little start. To say that we're a holes to each other is a fair point, but we love each other all the same. This is normally totally harmless, but a couple of weeks back, she started threatening to chew the wires on my phone charger when it's sitting by my bed at night. This scares the hell out of me for 2 reasons. 1. My phone charger runs at 5 volts, 2.48. If you know anything about electricity, you know that while this is a heavy, painful jolt for a human, but deadly for something the size of a cat. 2. A cat sitting on a bedside table is in no way grounded. At first, I started telling her off, but she just ignored me and kept going. I started to blow into her face. It's a dominance thing for a cat and a good way to dissuade them from doing something. And that worked for about a week. After that she just gave me a dirty look and tried to chew them again until I buried them under paper. When she started to knock the paper off the table to get to them, I knew it was serious. I devised a plan. I went down to the local office store and got some supplies. That night, I waited with the cord in my phone, charging, with no paper over the phone. She jumps up on the table, makes sure I'm watching her, and then starts to chew the cable. I told her off, which she ignored, and then I enacted my plan. I took a breath like I was going to blow into her face, at which point she shot me a dirty look. That's when I slowly pulled the can of compressed air out from under the sheets and gave her a short blast straight into her face. The effect was instantaneous and spectacular. The cat launched herself up 2 feet and back 6 feet off the bedside table. She landed safely on the ground in the bedroom. She checked fur, and seeing nothing there, looked at me in what I can only describe as abject horror. Eyes wide, mouth dropped open, every bit of fur sticking out. She stood like that for a few seconds before shaking herself out of it and tearing off into the lounge room. I went out and made a cup of tea and sat near the sofa she was under after putting some tuna and a saucer of milk down. It didn't take her long to come out looking for sympathy cuddles. It's been a week now. I think she's figured the cords are off limits. Fingers crossed. Thanks for listening.